Hello, this is Betsy Waugh, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the Thursday, July 23rd issue of the Democrat Chronicle on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Large fire destroys market building at Bauman's Farm. By Madison Scott, New York Connect Team, USA Today Network. A large fire destroyed the market building at Bauman's Farm on 5 Mile Line Road in Webster early Wednesday morning, according to a statement posted by the Bauman family on Instagram. The extent of the damage and the cause of the fire were not immediately known. The Bauman families had firefighters from the Webster, West Webster, Penfield, Brighton, and Irondequoit fire departments, quote, worked tirelessly throughout the night, unquote, to battle the blaze. No injuries were reported. Quote, our hearts are heavy, but we are incredibly grateful for what matters most. Everyone is safe, unquote, the family said in its statement. Quote, we are assessing our next steps and will provide updates here and on our social media pages as they become available, unquote. The reporter, Madison Scott, is a New York Connect reporter covering entertainment, breaking, and consumer news and trending topics with a focus on stories that matter to readers across New York State. She also has an interest in how the system helps or doesn't help families with missing loved ones. She can be reached at mdscott@usatodayco.com. Legionella found in water at St. Mary's. Hospital campus shifts to bottles for patients. By Kayla Kane, Rochester Democrat Chronicle, USA Today Network. Patients at Rochester Regional Health's St. Mary's campus are relying on bottled water after staff discovered elevated levels of Legionella bacteria in the medical center's water system. An RRH spokesperson said the bacteria was flagged the evening of July 17th. After notifying state health officials, the campus transitioned to bottled water for drinking and brushing teeth out of precaution. The medical center will also provide alternative bathing options for affected patients and residents. Legionella is a type of bacteria that grows in water. People can contract Legionnaire's disease, a serious form of pneumonia, when they breathe in mist that contains the bacteria. It's generally not spread through drinking water, though people can get sick if they aspirate on water containing Legionella. Quote, at this time, there's no disruption to patient care or operations, and we believe the risk to patients, residents, visitors, and team members remains low, the RRH spokesman said in a statement. These actions are being taken out of an abundance of caution while we continue remediation efforts and work closely with health officials to monitor the situation, unquote. The reporter, Kayla Kane, covers community safety for the Democrat Chronicle, with a focus on immigration, police accountability, government surveillance, and how people are impacted by violence. Follow her on Instagram at by Kayla Kane. Get in touch at kcanne@gannett.com. Affordability front of mind for many living in New York. By Emily Barnes, New York State Team, USA Today Network. New York's cost of living is weighing on residents' minds as inflation outpaces many of their incomes and they consistently face the highest taxes in the country, new data reveals. Both the state government and local governments across New York collect more tax revenue per resident than any other state as of 2023. Data from the newly released Citizens Budget Commission's, quote, competitive NYS, unquote, dashboard outlines. Additionally, the state's per capita tax collections are 78% above the national average, and personal income tax collections in New York are 112% higher than the rest of the nation. Quote, if high taxes deliver high quality of life, public services, and infrastructure, Residents and businesses can decide if the high cost of government is worth it, unquote, the nonprofit watchdog organization says. Quote, ultimately, the value proposition must hold. The cost of living or doing business needs to be worth the benefit of locating there, unquote. Here's what the data reveals. What New Yorkers are saying about the state's cost of living. Results of two polls conducted by the Siena Research Institute of registered New York voters in late April and mid-June show cost of living is front of mind. Quote, a clear majority of voters think the cost of living is the most important issue they're facing, and an overwhelming majority, 77%, say it's one of the two most important issues for New Yorkers, unquote, Siena pollster Stephen Greenberg said in the June poll. And according to the April poll, the majority of respondents, then 67%, said New York is headed in the wrong direction when it comes to addressing the cost of living. Inflation outpaces some New Yorkers' income levels. Across the state, income in every New York county increased between 2019 and 2024, a report from the New York State Comptroller's Office shows, and New Yorkers' average income exceeds the national average despite the higher incomes being concentrated in what the CBC calls the, quote, growth corridor, unquote, or in and around New York City, where much of New York's economic strength comes from. However, income levels are not keeping pace with inflation for many New Yorkers. While inflation-adjusted median household income increased by 2% statewide in that period, according to the most recent U.S. Census data, 23 of New York's 62 counties saw decreases, and the CBC says the rest of the state's average income outside of the quote-unquote growth corridor is trailing the nation. Specifically, Tioga County in the state's southern tier region saw the largest income decrease both by dollar amount and percentage, while Rockland County had the second largest decrease by dollar amount, and Chemung, Chemung County by percentage. On the other end of the spectrum, Greene and Ulster counties had the largest gains. Quote, when real incomes decline, New Yorkers struggle, the comptroller's report says. Those just starting out have a more difficult time establishing themselves, and others struggle to maintain the same quality of life, unquote. The state's taxes are also an issue when it comes to income levels. New York ranks second in taxes collected relative to personal income, which is 52% higher than the national average. While not directly tied to the state's taxes or inflation, the CBC says New York's out-migration to other parts of the country continues to grow. Between 2019 and 2023, New Yorkers left the state to live in these top states, bringing their money, or their total adjusted gross income, with them. Number one was New Jersey. 390,660 New Yorkers left with $25.8 billion. Number two was Florida. 375,911 New Yorkers left with $37.4 billion. The third state was Pennsylvania. 177,335 New Yorkers left with $7.5 billion. The fourth state was Connecticut. 148,316 New Yorkers left with $14.3 billion. And the fifth state was California. 140,771 New Yorkers left with $14.5 billion. Quote, continued focus on addressing the state's affordability challenges, as well as efforts to increase the growth of well-paying jobs across the state, are needed to ensure that all residents have the opportunity to thrive, unquote, State Comptroller Tom DiNapoli said. The reporter Emily Barnes covers state government for the USA Today Network New York, with a focus on how policy and laws impact New Yorkers' taxes, communities, and jobs. Follow her on Instagram or X at by Emily Barnes, and get in touch at EBARNES at usatodayco.com. Finger Lakes Theater Troupe to stage the Titanic. Rochester Democrat and Chronicle, USA Today Network. The Phelps Clifton Springs Community Theater celebrates its 49th year with the award-winning musical Titanic, and the cast and crew are doing so in a big way. The 62-member cast is the largest in the group's history, according to Keith E. Childs, who is artistic director of the Phelps Clifton Springs Community Theater. Titanic, the musical, is not often performed due to its complexities, Childs said, but this extremely talented cast has traveled from Scottsville in the west, Romulus in the east, and from many communities in between to give it a go. One cast member even traveled from New Jersey to participate. Quote, their talents will be on full display during the performance, especially the vocal talents of these individuals, unquote, Childs stated. Performances are scheduled for 7:30 p.m., July 23rd, 24th, and 25th, and around 2 p.m., July 26th, in the air-conditioned Mid-Lakes High School Auditorium, 1544 State Route 488 in Clifton Springs. What is it about? The musical follows several passengers who were aboard the famous ship and explores their relationships. From the emboldened owner and builder who believed their ship was unsinkable, to the emigrants in steerage hoping for a better life in America, the epic and everyday stories of the people on the legendary RMS Titanic are played out in this haunting musical. Note, the plot of the musical is not the same as the James Cameron film. The cast is led by Jeremy Cummings of Sodus as Captain E.J. Smith, Michael Witter of Newark as ship designer Thomas Andrews, and Dominic Vassilo of Phelps as a ship owner J. Bruce Ismay. The crew of the quote-unquote unsinkable ship is comprised of Trevor Barcom, Dan Hammond, Josh Bowman, Asa Smith, Peter Sprigg, Noah Smith, Stefan Uvegs, Matteo Botello, and Brian Cannon. Also, Kate Brennan, Audrey Brown, Everest Cook, Ellie Dorr, Krista Hittman, Delaney Colts, Michelle Lawson, Carrie Nees, Aaron O'Brien, Ava Ribstein, Phoebe Russell, Ashley Sykes, Susan Taylor, and Jennifer Kaplinsky-Wick are the stewardesses. First-class passengers include Joanne Saraceno, Chris Brown, Justin Doyle, Jenna Burke, Christopher Wright, Sierra Russell, Michael Lewis, Robin Uvegs, Alan Wacob, Carl Nees, Allie Cranmer, and Mary O. Cook. Rain Hammond-Benz, Ed Krenzer, Rachel Claire Lockhart, and Zachary Coolish portray the second-class passengers, and those in third class are Daniel Bishop, Rebecca Wacob, Marie Fisher, Mackenzie Forbes, Genevieve Brown, Julie Brown, Cindy Edler, Megan Forbes, Diane Lally, Anna Lightfoot, Carol Mills, Spencer Nyes, Josh Sode, Kara Strasser, Jeffrey Stoddard, Athena Tubilikas, Alina Tumbilikas, Karen Vac-Curico, and Regan Welke. Whoa. A little bit more. Behind the scenes, Childs is the director. The music directors, Jennifer Cornwell, Childs and Stefan Uvegs choreograph the show, while Trevor Barcombe and Uvegs serve as assistant directors. Diane Howard is stage manager. Behind the scenes, Charlie King serves as technical director and co-scenic designer with John George, and Ross Guilford is also designing the lights. Costume designers are Nancy Denisi, Susie Badowitz, and Carol Byron. Chris Brown is a graphic designer. The orchestra includes Elizabeth Rinkeen, Sonia Haskins, Laurie McPherson, Hannah Nyhan, John Record, Bryce Norson, and Stephanie Cheney. This production of Titanic is made possible in part with grants for the Nelson B. Delavan Foundation Part A and the Mary Hicks Preston Foundation. You have been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Democrat Chronicle on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Man charged with DWI after head-on crash with ambulance. The New York Connect Team, USA Today Network. A Montgomery County man is facing a drunken driving charge after New York State Police said he crashed head-on into an ambulance in Otsego County, sending 4 people to the hospital. The crash happened around 2:48 a.m. July 18th on State Highway 28 in the town of Milford. State police said Dylan Anthony Hayes, 25, of Fort Plain, was driving a 2004 Volkswagen south on State Highway 28 when he crossed into the opposite lane and struck a Headwaters EMS ambulance head-on. The impact forced the ambulance off the roadway. 4 people in the ambulance, a 60-year-old male driver, a 25-year-old woman, a 21-year-old man, and a 73-year-old man, were taken by Milford EMS to Bassett Medical Center. Police did not release information about the extent of their injuries. Troopers said Hayes was given standard field sobriety tests, which indicated he was impaired. He was arrested and charged with misdemeanor driving while intoxicated. Police said his reported blood alcohol content was 0.08%. Hayes was processed at state police in Oneonta and issued appearance tickets directing him to appear in Milford Town Court on August 18th, and the investigation remains ongoing. Obituaries. Giovanni or John Argento, Argento, age 73, in Gates, New York, passed on July 20th. Arrangements are through the DePonzio Funeral Home. Service time is July 25th at 10 a.m. at the St. Theodore Church, and interment is in the Holy Sepulchre Cemetery. Bruce McCutcheon, McCutcheon, age 63, in Rochester, New York, passed on July 19th. Arrangements are through the Miller Funeral and Cremation Services, Incorporated. Francesca Romanowski, age 75. Sister Rosemary St. Peter SSJ, age 97, in Pittsford, New York, passed on July 20th. Arrangements are through John A. Tripp Jr., New York State LFD. Service time is July 24th at 11 a.m. at 150 French Road, and interment will be at Holy Sepulchre Cemetery. And Mildred H. Villa, V-I-L-L-A. Arrangements are through the Bartholomew and Parada Funeral Home. Buffalo Bills draft decision at inside linebacker still a huge concern. Teams skating on thin ice in 3-4 defense heading into camp. This is the 6th in a 10-part series of questions facing the Buffalo Bills as they head into training camp at St. John Fisher University. After Brandon Beane was finished tap dancing his way out of the first round of the 2026 NFL Draft, he wound up with the 35th overall pick early in the second, and when it came time to finally make a selection, he had a bevy of opportunities to fill what seemed like an obvious need. With linebackers Matt Milano and Shaq Thompson off the team and testing free agency, though neither player has yet been signed, Beane could have taken Jacob Rodriguez, Hosea Trotter, Jake Golday, C.J. Allen, or Anthony Hill, all players who would eventually get picked before the end of the second round. Instead, in the never-ending pursuit of pass rush help, he went with outside linebacker / edge rusher T.J. Parker and waited until the fourth round to bring in competition for inside linebackers Terrell Bernard and Dorian Williams in the form of Caleb Elarms-Orr. The Bills' linebacker depth is a concern. At the time, it didn't feel like the prudent play. Bernard was coming off an injury-plagued 2025, but before that in 2024, he took a small step back from his excellent 2023 performance when he was a first-time starter. Williams has spent his first 3 seasons in Buffalo as a somewhat inconsistent backup, making 22 starts only because of injuries to Milan and I'm sorry, to Milan and I lost place of my time, or Bernard. I'm sorry. Also, Williams is heading into the final year of his original rookie contract, so the inside linebacker position in Jim Leonard's 3-4 base defense was ripe for help. Now, maybe Alarms-ORR, that's his last name, is spelled ELARMS-ORR, winds up being a steal in the 5th round, and he either beats out Bernard or Williams as a start of the season, or at the very least becomes Williams' replacement in 2027, assuming Williams isn't re-signed. But for this year, the Bills are skating on thin ice, with only Bernard, Williams, Alarms Orr, Joe Andreessen, Keontae Jenkins, and Demetrius Flanagan-Falls as viable depth chart options. Excluding Bernard and Williams, those other 4 have a combined 13 NFL starts, 10 by Flanagan-Falls, who, like Andreessen, has primarily been a special teams contributor. A return to form and good health from Bernard is vital and would quell some of the concerns about the position group, and the switch to Leonard's defense might be just what he needs. Terrell Bernard believes the new defense fits his strengths. Quote, I think there are certain things that fit my play style and things that I'm good at, which I'm excited about, Bernard said. At the end of the day, it's football, and the position is the position. But I feel like there are certain things that I'll be able to play within my game and execute a little bit, unquote. Specifically, Bernard thinks he can use his athleticism in a more productive way as a man-to-man cover linebacker who can also be sent on blitzes, something he did frequently in 2023, but not so much in the last 2 years. Quote, he's a pro, unquote, Leonard said after getting a look at Bernard during the off-season program. Quote, everything in the classroom, the meetings, the communication, the focus level he has, it's really impressive to see every day. As he continues to get healthier, we know what he is on the field. He's a person that you know what he can do, and a half of it is the leadership, the intangibles as far as communication on the field in between series. He kills that. Full go at camp is what we expect, unquote. Williams missed a chunk of the OTAs with an undisclosed injury, one that had him on crutches. Having studied his film, Leonard knows Williams is an outstanding physical athlete, and now the trick will be to get him to be more consistent on a play-to-play basis, especially when he's in coverage. Quote, he's a guy, fresh start, new defense, putting him in some different positions to show his versatility and his leadership more than anything, Leonard said. Being that every down backer for us, I'm excited about his start and just want to continue to grow. My goal in the offseason was really to overload and throw as many things at him as possible, make him uncomfortable, and force communications. Dorian's a guy that's going to have an opportunity to make a huge impact in this defense. How comfortable can they get? How fast can they get comfortable to where they're just flying around and playing with violence, playing with physicality? That's the big test from now to training camp, unquote. Will the Bills add linebacker help before week 1? Depending on how camp goes and what the health situation looks like, there's certainly a possibility that Bean reaches out to Thompson, a veteran he has a long history with, and one who joined the Bills last season and became a key player once Bernard went down. A reunion with Milano seems less likely, especially since he really took a step back in performance last year, but hey, you never know. The reporter, Sal Mariana, has covered the Buffalo Bills for more than 4 decades, including 37 years as the full-time beat writer/columnist for the DNC. He has written numerous books about the history of the team and is also co-host of the BLEAV, or Believe in Bills podcast/YouTube show. He can be reached at mariana@gannett.com, and you can follow him on X at Sal Mariana and on Blue Sky at Sal at SALMAIORANA.bsky.social. McQuaid grad wins prestigious Rochester District Golf Association title by Justin Ritzel, Rochester Democrat Chronicle, USA Today Network. Alex Hill, a 2024 McQuaid graduate and current Colgate University men's golf player, won the Rochester District Golf Association District Championship last weekend at Stafford Country Club. Hill finished at 1 under par 215 across the three-day tournament, which comes with a $700 purse. He was the tournament's leader after day one when he scored a 5 under 67, the top single-day score of the weekend, but struggled with a 77 on day two. On day three, when others on the leaderboard faded, Hill shot 1 under to regain the lead. Quote, "I just thought keep it simple. Fairways and greens, and maybe a putt or two will drop," unquote, Hill said in an RDGA press release. With the win, Hill earns an exemption to this week's Monroe Invitational and the 2027 New York State Men's Amateur Championship. The victory earned Hill 500 points toward the 2026 RDGA Men's Player of the Year race and the World Amateur Golf Ranking. Hill recently completed his sophomore season at Colgate. The Victor native, who majors in applied mathematics, recorded a 77.6 adjusted average across 21 rounds. That includes a sixth-place finish at the Autumn Invitational last September in Lake Placid. Prior to college, Hill was a two-time All-Greater Rochester selection at McQuaid. He qualified for the 2024 NYSPHSAA Championships, where he shot a 4 over 148 to place 14th at the Mark Twain Golf Course in Elmira. The RDGA also recognized two others at the tournament's conclusion. Jim Scorsese, SCORSE, a 61-year-old member at Stafford, won the annual Low Senior Medal given to the top-scoring player aged 55 or older. Scorsese finished tied for 7th. Ron Plummer, a Ridgemont Country Club member, received the John Henry Ryan Gentleman of Golf Award, which recognizes a player and administrator for sportsmanship. That award is voted on by the district championship field. There's a long list of other finishers, and I will just finish by saying that for most of its history, the tournament was a 72-hole stroke play competition, but that changed in 2020 when the format downsized to a 3-day 54-hole event. Roots, Rhythm, and Community. Black Culture Festival returns to Parcel 5 with music, food, and fun. By Janae Shields, Rochester Democrat Chronicle, USA Today Network. The annual Black Culture Festival returns this weekend to downtown Rochester's Parcel 5. Each year, this festival celebrates Rochester's Black community through culture, food, music, entrepreneurship, and education. The theme for the festival is Homecoming, in celebration of the connection between education, school pride, and Black culture. Organizers are encouraging attendees to represent their alma mater, from Rochester City Schools and surrounding districts to HBCUs, colleges, universities, trade schools, fraternities, and sororities. Throughout the July 24th to 25th festival, there will be several events for families to enjoy. From 5 to 8 p.m. on July 24th, that's Friday, families are invited to Friday Night Lights, a free concert featuring live music from local artists. The concert will be hosted on Parcel 5, 285 East Main Street. Quote, "All the performers that's on the main stage are all from Rochester who've been doing music for anywhere from 1 year to 10 years to 15 years. Some of them are returning to the main stage," unquote, said festival founder Will Powers. The 7th annual Black Culture Festival also takes place on July 25th. The festival is free and open to the public. From noon until 8 p.m. on July 25th, families will be able to enjoy live music, local vendors, food, and a variety of activities, including Family Field Day, Rochester's largest Soul Train line, high school alumni roll call, college fraternity and sorority roll call, family fashion show, double Dutch competition, spades championship, roller skating, Black culture trivia, quote, "We've always done line dancing, but we've never done a Soul Train line," unquote, Powers said, quote, "And what's more for Black culture than Don Cornelius and the Soul Train Awards and the Soul Train Show," unquote. Powers hopes participants will help create Rochester's biggest Soul Train line and hopes the line will stretch from East Main Street to Elm Street or Portland Avenue to Andrew Langston Way. Scholarship and award opportunities. The BFC Next Step Scholarship is an annual initiative from the festival that's dedicated to supporting graduate high school seniors. For students to be eligible for the scholarship, they must plan to attend a college, university, trade school, vocational program, or plan on entering the workforce with a professional certification or business venture. Students must also demonstrate leadership, community involvement, and commitment to future success. The award will start at $500, and students must submit a video presentation. Festival organizers are also encouraging community members to nominate a Black educator for the Honor Our Black Educators ceremony. Organizers will award Black educators that are making a positive impact on RCSD students based on community nominations. Ribs and Rhythm. From noon until 8 p.m. on July 25th, residents and visitors are invited to a new festival meant to bring together barbecue lovers, music enthusiasts, and the community. Ribs and Rhythm is hosted by Will Powers and the Black Culture Festival organizers. Attendees will be able to enjoy barbecue from a variety of local food vendors, live performances from artists of all genres, and some interactive experiences, including barbecue competitions and tastings, local vendors, and cooking demonstrations. If you go, it's the Black Culture Festival at Parcel 5, 285 East Main Street. General admission is $20, including taxes and fees. Visit eventbrite.com for more ticket information, and details can be found at theblackculturefest.com. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Democrat Chronicle on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Andrew Dice Clay Coming to Rochester in October by Marcia Greenwood, Rochester Democrat Chronicle, USA Today Network. Comedian Andrew Dice Clay is coming to West Hare Auditorium Theater for a 7:30 p.m. show on October 22nd. Tickets can be bought at the Auditorium box office, 885 East Main Street, and Ticketmaster.com. Prices at the box office start at $45.50 and at $57.30 through Ticketmaster. The Dice Man, I guess is his nickname, rose to fame in the late 1980s. Brash, offensive, and leather-clad, he was best known for spouting vulgar nursery rhymes. In 1990, he became the first comedian to sell out New York City's Madison Square Garden for 2 consecutive nights. That same year, he hosted Saturday Night Live, prompting cast member Nora Dunn and the scheduled musical guest, Sinead O'Connor, to boycott the show in protest. He also was banned from MTV for a time. He has released gold and platinum selling albums, including The Day the Laughter Died, and best-selling DVDs, Dice Rules, and starred in several HBO pay-per-view and Showtime stand-up specials. More recently, he's been recognized for his acting, including on the final season of Entourage, where he played a self-deprecating version of himself. He was also featured in Woody Allen's Blue Jasmine from 2013, Martin Scorsese's Final in 2016, and Bradley Cooper's A Star is Born in 2018, in which he portrayed the father of the Lady Gaga character. In 2014, Simon & Schuster published his autobiography, The Filthy Truth. The reporter, Marcia Greenwood, primarily covers the grocery business and consumer-focused grocery news, as well as retail development, openings, and closings. Send story tips to mgreenwood at rochester.gannett.com and follow her on X at MarciaGreenwood. Phelps Sauerkraut Weekend goes all out for America's 250th. Rochester Democrat and Chronicle. The Phelps Sauerkraut Weekend will celebrate America's 250th birthday with a Stars, Stripes, and Sauerkraut theme. The village-wide celebration, July 30th to August 2nd, will include marketplace vendors on the festival grounds, events at the American Legion and Carnival rides, and community vendors at the Carnival site on Ontario Street. Other activities will include live entertainment, food vendors, the Crowder 5K and 20K, 2 parades, fireworks, a crowd crawl, car and tractor shows, horse-drawn wagon rides, kids zone and family activities, children's games, a pancake breakfast, a chicken barbecue, eating contests, and other competitions and more. Among them is the Sauerkraut Weekend Kitty Costume Parade, which will start at 6 p.m. Thursday, July 30th at Redfield Park. The Sauerkraut Weekend Parade will begin at 4 p.m. Saturday, August 1st at the intersection of Main and South Wayne Streets. It will start west on Main Street, then proceed south on Eagle Street and east on Ontario Street, ending at the driveway on the Carnival grounds off Ontario Street. The map is at www.phelpsbdtc.com/parade information. The Sauerkraut Weekend Cake Cutting Ceremony will begin at 7 p.m. Saturday, August 1st at the Pavilion grounds. Recipes for chocolate sauerkraut cake, silver floss sauerkraut spice cake, kraut Swiss steak, and more can be found at www.phelpsbdtc.com/recipes. And the Sauerkraut Weekend 20K, which the Phelps Business Development and Tourism Council says is the oldest race in the Finger Lakes, and a 5K will be held on Saturday, August 1st. Packet pickup will begin at 6:30 a.m. at the lot at the corner of Main and Flint. If you need a marker, use 8 Banta Street, Phelps Community Center. The 20K early start for anyone who runs a 12-minute mile or slower is at 7 a.m., while the regular start will be at 8 a.m. The 5K will begin at 8:30 a.m. The entry fee for the 20K is $59.30, and for the 5K is $43.40. Registration ends at 5:45 p.m. Friday, July 31st. All participants will get shirts, finisher medals, post-race food, and a can of sauerkraut, while the top 3 finishers will get recognition. A post-race celebration will begin at 10 a.m. near the finish line. Sign up and more information can be found at runsignup.com/race/events/ny/Phelps/Phelps Sauerkraut Weekend 20K 5K. The festival began as a one-day festival in 1967 when Phelps was one of the largest producers of sauerkraut in the world. Where to watch The Odyssey, the movie, in 70mm IMAX by Madison Scott, New York Connect Team USA Today Network. Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey has been out in theaters for less than a week, and New Yorkers have the chance to see the film in its intended format. The Odyssey is the first major motion picture to be filmed entirely with IMAX cameras, which were loaded with Kodak 65mm motion picture film made in Rochester, New York. There are only 25 theaters in the United States showing The Odyssey in 70mm IMAX, which allows viewers to see the film in the highest resolution and on the largest screen available. There are only 2 New York theaters showing The Odyssey in 70mm IMAX, the AMC Lincoln Square 13 in IMAX in New York City, and the Cinemark, Tinseltown, Rochester, and IMAX in Gates. What is 70mm IMAX? The 70mm IMAX theaters will allow moviegoers to see The Odyssey in the highest resolution and on the largest screen possible. Standard film strips are 35mm, so 70mm film makes the full movie physically larger and higher resolution. The 70mm IMAX screens are also huge, which will allow you to see the entire frame of the movie. Leroy football captain's sacrifice still inspires 65 years later. By Jeff Uvino, spelled Uveino, Rochester Democrat and Chronicle, USA Today Network, from Leroy. Few names stand out in Leroy football's storied history quite like John N. Aramino Jr. Aramino, a fullback and National Honor Society student, co-captained the Oatkin Knights in 1960. He was killed the following spring in a heroic act which saved a young boy's life. Some 65 years have passed since Aramino died protecting Lewis B. Brady III from an oncoming train. Aramino's legacy, passed through generations of players and students, is now cemented on a sign within the village of Leroy. Trigon Park sits in the heart of Leroy, a mile's drive from the high school. A sign honoring Aramino now stands there. Spearheaded by Jim Bonaquisti, Bonacquisti, the longtime Leroy assistant coach who published a book on the program's history in 2018, efforts to dedicate this sign were completed July 19th. Friends, family, and community members gathered to remember Aramino, including more than a dozen winners of the scholarship which still bears his name. Quote, "It's so important for people in our community to know about the great folks who came before them," Bonaquisti said. Put yourself in Aramino's shoes and think, who would want to do that in a split second? That tells you what kind of guy he was. He was, with a capital K, a knight, unquote. Legacy of selflessness. Few who knew Aramino were surprised by what he did. Any other kid, myself included, will be hesitant to run in front of a train like Aramino did, said Joe Calori, a close friend of Aramino. But he would do that because that's the type of person he was, unquote. Calori recalled he and Aramino surveying Leroy's party scene the night before tragedy struck. The next afternoon, Calori arrived at the scene shortly after Aramino was killed near Owatka Creek's Buttermilk Falls. Quote, "Aramino was a very strong-willed person," Calori said. "If he wanted to do something, he would," unquote. Word spread of Aramino's act. President John F. Kennedy posthumously awarded the Young American Medal for Bravery to Aramino in 1963. He also received a medal from the Carnegie Hero Fund. Honoring a hero. Bonaquisti, though not yet born when Aramino died, felt compelled to act. Quote, "People need to know about that," Bonaquisti said. "Listening to Aramino's friends talk about him now, nobody was surprised at what he did. That's John, that's what he was going to do. Who does that?" they would say, unquote. Leroy football looks different these days. The Watkin Knights now participate in a cooperative program with former Route 5 foe Caledonia Mumford. They're known, of course, as the Rivals with an uppercase R. Bonaquisti coaches special teams, but tradition lives at Leroy, such as through the John Aramino Award, a scholarship given annually to a graduating student. All who visit Trigon Park will now know his name. Quote, "Aramino's legacy is a saying, no greater love has a man than to give his life for a friend," unquote. Calori said that was John, unquote. That same phrase is carved into the headstone at Aramino's grave. It's also on the sign at Trigon Park above a QR code which links to his story. Jeff Uvino, Uveino, joined the USA Today Network in 2023 and began covering Rochester area high school sports in 2026. He's a graduate of St. Bonaventure University's Andoli School of Communication and native of Perry. Contact him at juvino@usatodayco.com. Follow him on X at REALJUVEINO and on Instagram at Jeff U Sports. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Democrat Chronicle on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Iowa mom first to undergo quadruple organ transplant. Patient goes home months after procedure at Northwestern. By Nora Judson, Des Moines Register, USA Today Network. Sitting poolside, soaking up the sun would be a picturesque summer day for many people across the United States, including 36-year-old Elizabeth Worrell, spelled W-E-H-R-L-E. But for the Iowa mother and her son Landon, this pool time is especially precious. Worrell has just become the first person to undergo a quadruple organ transplant. She went home July 17th for the first time since she stepped out for a doctor's visit in mid-February. A decline in health. Worrell, again spelled W-E-H-R-L-E, was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis when she was 11 years old, the same age as her son now. In 2017, she underwent her first lung transplant. Early in 2026, her lungs began to fail again, this time from chronic rejection. Quote, everyone kept telling me that my lungs sounded fine, Worrell said, yet I was in total respiratory failure, unquote. A noticeable decline in health in early January prompted Worrell to visit the hospital where she was diagnosed with pneumonia. On January 14th, she went into the University of Iowa Healthcare Medical Center for a checkup. Doctors completed a routine pulmonary function test, which showed a quote-unquote dramatic decline of Worrell's lungs. After an exploratory bronchoscopy, she was admitted to the hospital. At that point, doctors weren't certain what was wrong, Worrell said. She was treated for a bacterial infection, sent home to wait for the cultures from the tissue removed in her bronchoscopy to grow. The uncertainty was awful, said Worrell. Quote, I had declined enough that I wasn't able to work, Worrell said. I had such severe anxiety that I couldn't breathe, that I wasn't able to go and do normal activities. I wasn't able to walk great distances. Some days I wasn't able to leave my house or get dressed by myself just because of the anxiety and the shortness of breath. It felt very similar to what I experienced before the first transplant, unquote. 3 weeks later, Worrell went in for a follow-up appointment. She'd been slated to have a secondary bronchoscopy that day, but when she arrived at the hospital, doctors agreed she wasn't well enough. Instead, she was admitted once again for closer observation. On February 25th, Worrell was undergoing a plasma exchange procedure meant to stop her body from rejecting her lungs when she became unresponsive and was placed on a ventilator. Though the University of Iowa Healthcare Medical Center performed single organ transplants, they couldn't perform Worrell's because her case was too severe. It wasn't just her lungs that were failing, her liver and her kidneys were too. So Worrell hooked up to her extracorporeal membrane oxygenation machine, got on a small plane bound for Northwestern Medicine in Chicago. There was no room on board for anyone other than her and the medical team. Since her son was born, Worrell's been able to tell him all of her health updates. But because Worrell was unresponsive when she got on the plane, she couldn't speak with Landon before she left. Quote, it was very hard, Worrell said. He was having more trouble this time around. Because when I was intubated at the end of February, my parents were the ones telling him I was in respiratory failure and I would have to go to Chicago, unquote. First of its kind, Dr. Ankit Bharat, Chief of Thoracic Surgery at Northwestern Medicine, and Dr. Satish Nadig, N-A-D-I-G, Chief of Organ Transplantation at Northwestern Medicine, did not go into the surgery with the intention of doing something that had never been done before. They went into it with the goal of saving Worrell's life. Quote, when we heard about Elizabeth, we just thought, she's a young mom and she's in a terminal situation, Bharat said. We couldn't just say that nothing can be done, unquote. By the time Worrell arrived at Northwestern, she was already on life support, her lungs, liver, and kidney all failing. Quote, while we couldn't find a similar case in the National Transplant Registry data, our team, we believed we could help Worrell because of our expertise and camaraderie and collaborative effort, Nadig said. When people hear about a historic transplant surgery, they often focus on the operation itself. But really, what made Elizabeth's case successful was the extraordinary teamwork that occurred before, during, and after the surgery, unquote. The surgery took about 8 hours, with Royal receiving new lungs, a liver, and a kidney. The surgery required precise timing and intense collaboration across multiple surgical teams, but according to Natick, knowing their success meant Worrell would get to go home to her son was the greatest motivator. Quote, if there's one thing I hope people take away from my story, it's that organ donations really save lives, and I'm living proof of that, Worrell said. Thank you for giving me a second chance, unquote. Road to recovery. Quote, I'm still working on getting some muscle mass gain back and building up more of my endurance, Worrell said. I'm not able to work until March. Just give me time to recover and, for all the pieces inside to go back to where they belong. But I'm feeling back to my baseline, unquote. Worrell is more than ready to be home. After spending so long in the hospital, she says there are many milestones she's missed, including celebrating her own birthday. Her son has already planned the festivities for her return, their yearly tradition of bowling and going out to eat. The thing Worrell is most looking forward to, however, is going to the pool with Landon and showing off her scars. I had to kind of get used to the new body, and going through all of this was but my son doesn't care. He just wants mom at the pool, so we're going to go to the pool, unquote. Immigration arrests hit new record, DHS says, by Ignacio Calderon and Christopher Kahn, USA Today. After a 3-month delay, the longest in its recent history, the Department of Homeland Security on July 20th published detention numbers that show immigration enforcement activity grew again under Secretary Mark Wayne Mullen. The figures show immigration and customs enforcement arrests at a record level, with the number of people in detention increasing again, notably reversing a dip from detainees with no criminal record. The new data showing an uptick in enforcement follows backlash over recent fatal shootings, one in Texas and one in Maine, that again thrust the agency into the national spotlight. Earlier in 2026, the agency's high-profile operations in multiple cities led to calls for more accountability and transparency in immigration enforcement and a months-long stalemate over the agency's funding. Ariel Ruiz-Soto, S-O-T-O, a senior policy analyst at the Migration Policy Institute, said the new numbers point to a change in immigration tactics, but with similar results as before. Quote, the previous tactics were more visual, were more publicly controversial. They were more targeted in places and cities that were pushing against the Trump administration, Ruiz-Soto said. Now the strategy is less visible, at least until the recent death, but the outcomes haven't really changed significantly if you look at the bigger picture, unquote. Ruiz-Soto pointed to the share of people detained without a criminal record, which has grown the most of any group under the second Trump administration. The new numbers show the average daily number of people booked into detention from ICE arrests reached over 1,300 in June, a 32% increase since April, Mullen's first month. It's also the highest of any month going back to 2021, according to a USA Today compilation of historical files. While the increase is significant, the pace of removals has stayed roughly flat, with the total number of people in detention increasing after the reversal that followed the deadly shootings in Minneapolis in January. A DHS spokesperson said in an email the agency has been delivering on President Donald Trump's promise to arrest and deport people with a criminal record. The spokesperson pointed to most arrests being of people charged or convicted of a crime. The latest data shows detainees from ICE arrests without a criminal record made up 37% of the detained population, compared with the 6% in January of 2025. Data published July 20th marked over 100 days since the last update in April, pushing the average time between releases so far in 2026 to 42 days, nearly 3 times the historical schedule. Through 2025, Trump's first year back in office, and the 4 years before, ICE had been relatively consistent about publishing data roughly every 2 weeks, following a congressional mandate to do so. DHS typically publishes additional data sets that dive into other aspects of immigration enforcement in more detail, such as arrests and deportations. However, the agency hasn't updated those since the end of 2024, making the detention management data released July 20th the last accountability tool to track immigration enforcement. You have been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Thursday, July 23rd issue of the Democrat Chronicle. Your reader has been Betsy Bois. Thank you for listening.